Craig, before we get onto our main topic this month, you messaged me that you had got yourself you've got a stairwell display cabinet.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll let you run with what you've been up to over the Christmas period.
Yeah, it was just a little rabbit hole that I found myself down, and I thought I'd drag you lot down with me. So I'm not going to dwell too much about the cabinet in and of itself. It's part of my collecting area, which I had to improvise and be creative with, which sort of runs up the stairs and above the stairwell in the height of an apartment that doesn't have a loft. So it's a very high ceiling, but it was dead space. So I built into it. But part of what I did was I created this action figure cabinet, which sits kind of over the stairs as you walk up, and as you dogleg around, you see this thing. But it's been finished, it's been painted. I vinyled it probably a couple of years ago, and it's taken me ages and ages to fill it, and that's partly because I've been cross-referencing my collection with the information that's out there these days, which is nothing like it was when I was first putting this run together. So that was partly to check for repros, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, but also partly just to see what variants I had, because that knowledge was there and I needed to know how to scratch the itch. So it's taken a long time, but the weekend just gone, I finally got through that, double checking all that stuff and logging it, and it was time to put these figures up. Now, who on the call tonight has got a loose run?
Yeah, I have a loose run.
Stuart, I know you've had one in the past.
I've had several in the past, yeah. It's about half full again. It's getting there.
Mark?
No, I got rid of mine.
We've all had one at some point, and I imagine when you've had it out on display, you've put it in what is the collecting convention of release order. So starting with the first 12 and then running up to the last 17 or 15 UK collectors, which is it's what we all accept. People make those cabinets, don't they, with the little gaps, and you fill them in, and they've got little coloured squares behind them, and that's kind of how it's done. But casual observer looking at that makes no sense whatsoever, because these figures were released out of order, and I think Luke Stormtrooper is the sort of shining example of that. But what I wanted to do to book that trend is to put them into movie order release, so order of appearance, if you like. And it threw up some interesting things, and some of the decisions, some of the places I put these things, I think are open to interpretation. But I wanted to just go through it with you, see if you agreed, see if you'd have put these things where I've put them, but also highlight a couple of unusual things that I've never noticed before until I went through this exercise. So are you up for that?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'm not going to make this into a super long quiz, but starting off, first character who appears on the screen, C-3PO, closely followed by R2-D2. We see stormtroopers blasting through the door in the Tantive, and the boarding scene, and Vader follows. So that all happens. So the next character to appear after Vader is Leia. We cut to Leia, and we have the scene with her and R2 and her evading capture. But then there's another character that comes in. Any guesses out of the whole of the 96 who I might have put in this place? Feel free to grab some reference, grab a card back if there's one.
Imperial Commander.
Yes.
Yeah, I would have said that, yeah.
Absolutely. So they're in the boarding party, and they are there now. Off the card, he is a generic commander. On the card in his Empire card, is it General Viers? He belongs somewhere else, but in a loose run, that's where he goes. So from that scene, we are with the droids on Tatooine, and we've got a Jawa, and we encounter 3 more figures very early on that didn't come in that first 12.
Power droid.
Power droid's 1.
Death Star droid.
Yeah.
There's another.
R5D4.
And R5 is the third. So while he's down as the Death Star droids, the card back and the fact that he's silver makes that character the droid that's in the Sandcrawler. You see him first, then you see Power Droid, then you've got R5, all in quick succession. Moving on, we meet Luke, we encounter some Sand People, we encounter Ben Kenobi, and then we cut back to the Death Star.
Yeah.
And we've got who?
Death Squad Commander.
Death Squad Commander, yeah. So that's where he goes. Then we're at the cantina. Now, to do this, I obviously got Disney Plus up on the laptop, and I was freeze framing and scrolling through. So in order of appearance in the cantina, there's a long shot where you've got Walrus Man in the foreground.
Snaggletooth.
Chewie.
Oh!
Chewie's there at the bar. Then you've got sort of a close-up of Snaggletooth. I think he turns around as Luke's walking in. And then as it's cutting around the cantina, you've got Hammerhead. And you get through all those characters before you get to Han. And then, of course, you've got Greedo.
Yeah.
So you've got all the way through the movie. Then the most obvious shift about comes because you've got Luke from the last 17 comes right up the front in his Stormtrooper gear, closely followed by him in his X-Wing pilot gear. Then another character from Empire,
Oh, the TIE fighter pilot.
TIE fighter pilot. So they're in the space battle. And then towards the end of the movie, the last figure of all 96 that appears in A New Hope.
Imperial Gunner.
Yeah, interesting stuff, I thought, to get to that point. Rattling through Hoth, we see Luke first, we see Han, he comes inside, we've got some rebel soldiers, and then Han takes off his snow trousers, because the next time we see him, he's walking to the command centre and he's got his Bespin gear on. Bespin, Han is right up at the front, then we see Leia, and then we see our first mustachioed rebel commander. Now the next one I think is really interesting, right? So I've got, who do you think?
FX7.
Not FX7.
2-1B.
No, very close.
B12.
It's at this point in the movie that R2 starts scanning for Luke.
Ooh, yeah.
So pop-up sensor scope R2 appears here. But if you look at the figure and you look at the moulding of the sensor scope itself, technically he should go further down in the Dagobah scene. You only ever see that. You don't see the figure with it sticking up. You only ever see it some frogman.
The design of the sensor scope in itself is actually the Dagobah one.
Yeah, but the card back shows the one that's like a little radar dish. I'm not alone in finding this stuff interesting. Yeah, I've been living with this stuff for years and years, and you go through an exercise like this and it just throws up different.
This is an education, Craig.
One thing I've noticed though, Craig,
Yeah.
is that you've kind of not done this with the special editions, because shouldn't Jabba the Hutt be in there?
Do you know, my cabinet's not big enough.
I'm Bob Fett.
And Boba Fett, yeah.
Fett, yeah. This is a despecialized edition. So the two medical droids are next, and then the attack starts, and we've got the ATAT commander. He's center frame, and you've got the ATAT drivers kind of to the side, and he's a little bit out of focus. So strictly speaking, the commander comes first, and all the Hoth troopers, and then we get to Dagobah, and we've got Yoda, and then we've got Luke Bespin. I had to double check this because I wondered whether belt was different, whether he attached the belt later down the line, but he's wearing the Bespin gear on Dagobah. So that's two Bespin figures that we've had so far, and we haven't even got to Cloud City.
So technically, it's Luke Skywalker Dagobah fatigues.
Strictly speaking, yeah.
Strictly speaking, yeah. And it's also interesting as well that the Leia Hoth, as we see it as Leia Hoth, well, all she does is take off a body warmer. That's part of her attire on Bespin.
Okay, then we're into the bounty hunters. There is a certain order that these appear. So you see Bosk's feet first, don't you? And then it pans up. And
Yeah.
the scene jumps around. But I couldn't bring myself to put them in that order. So I've put them in the order that you always see them. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't know, Craig. If you've been really, really strict with the rest of the line, and then you've changed it in the middle, I think that's a bit dirty.
Do you? I might wake up in the middle of the night with that thought in my mind.
If I wake up in the middle of the night, I might text you about it.
Yeah, do that. I'll check it in the morning.
He really will as well.
Yeah, it just didn't feel right. Put them in that crazy sort of the way they blocked that scene is just runs counter to my instincts. So on from the bounty hunters, we get to Bespin. So the first character that we encounter in Bespin.
Car pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the scene on the gantry, we've got Lando, then Lobot, then a couple of the guards, and we're on Bespin for a while before Leia appears. Now after Leia Bespin, I've put another character. Who do you think I put after Leia Bespin?
Ugnaught.
No.
3PO removable limbs.
Yes. So I've displayed him in bits.
Yeah, 3PO removable limbs and then Ugnaught.
That's right. And then that brings us to the end of Empire. So moving on to Jedi, there's a clear sequence. I think most people would get this. So you encounter the Gamorrean Guard first, then you've got Bib Fortuna, and then again looking at this stuff again with this exercise in mind, you start to notice things that probably not noticed before. So next up is Yak Face. So Yak Face is there in the background as the droids come in. You've got Reyes in there, a Man. He's to the side of Han when he's on the wall, and the camera goes to the Han in carbonite, and a Man turns around and looks at it. Then you're into the two droids, 88 and EV99. You've got Squidhead comes in next. Then you get into the main characters. So which of the main characters comes in at this point?
Boosh.
Yep.
Leia Boosh, yeah. Then Lando Skiff.
Yep.
Then Han Solo Carbonite.
Yep.
Then Luke Jedi.
There's a little bit where you see Klaatu before Luke comes in. After Luke, it's easy.
Is it?
Brain freeze.
And what happens to Luke after he comes in and tries to strike a deal?
Well, he goes to the great pit of Carcoon.
I'll put you out of your misery. It's the Rancor
No,
Keeper.
EV99.
It's the Rancor Keeper. So then we're outside and we're off to the Great Pit of Carcoon. So we've got our guys on the skiff.
What about EV99?
I've said him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's been said.
For Squidhead.
Sitting right next to 8D8.
That's
I
it.
am listening.
So our 3 skiff guards.
Barada.
Weekway.
Yeah.
Platinum Skiff Guard.
Well, isn't that an interesting point? The 3rd skiff guard is Nikto. Then we get to another character,
R2 pop up.
R2 pop-up. Then we get to Klaatu, who is not a skiff guard at all. He's a sail barge guy, unless you sort of argue that he's protecting and he's guarding the skiff by being on the sail barge. He's not actually a skiff guard. He runs onto the deck of the sail barge. So then we cut to Death Star. Got 3 Imperials.
Biker Scout.
No.
Now, you see the Biker Scout in the lineup, don't you? When they come off the Imperial shuttle.
Emperor, Imperial Dig,
Yeah.
and
I might
Emperor's Royal
revisit
Guard.
that
Yeah.
Biker Scout. I think you're right, Mark.
So yeah, Biker Scout would come into that.
You're right.
So that landing scene's a bit of a sticky one because so many characters in the background that you could argue, well, any of the Imperial troops could fit into there.
ATST driver.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
you need to go back and freeze frame that, I think.
Because you don't actually see the Imperial dignitary. You can sort of see people moving behind,
Dignitary comes later in the throne room scene.
but they are there. You can see them. So you see what I mean? It's some of it's open to interpretation. So moving on
We're
from
going to let it slide, Craig, this time.
No. It's a work in progress. It's why I'm bringing my friends into the discussion. Moving on from the Imperials to the Rebels. So we've got the briefing scene.
Yeah.
So there's an establishing shot of the briefing room, and at the back,
A-Wing pilot,
yeah, you've got the pilots.
B-Wing pilot.
You've got the A and the B wing pilots are stood at the back in their green and blue, holding their helmets. You can see Rebel Commandos are in there with their helmets. Then you've got like a little gang of prune faces, and then Akbar makes a bit of an entrance, and you've got Maydeen, and then you've got Lando General, and then you see Nien Nunb in the background when Han and Lando are talking about the Falcon and not getting it scratched. You sort of see him wander past in his little natty waistcoat.
It's the worst costume out of all the isn't it? I mean, red and blue. I mean, it's shocking.
I think he looks pretty snazzy, to be honest.
Right, okay, mate. Next time we see you, I want to see you in a red overalls and a blue waistcoat.
I'd do it.
You would as well.
I would do it.
Tucking your trousers into your boots is always a strong look.
It is.
Right, so we're now onto the last row, or the top row of my cabinet. So we're into Endor, and it all unravels a little bit.
Oh, Ewoks. This is gonna suck. This is gonna suck.
So we've got Han and Luke and Leia, who all walk across the screen like a Scooby-Doo scene.
Yeah.
In a row. I'm going to revisit. I've got my biker scout there. I might revisit him now on the back of this conversation. So obviously the first Ewok we encounter is easy,
Wicket,
and then the next two they're kind of clear.
Tebow and Logray.
Tebow and Paplu.
Paplu is the one who jumps on the speeder bike.
He was, but I'm pretty sure he's one of the ones that when they're in the net and they're in the hunting party, I think he's one of the hero costumes that's kind of waggling his spear. Willing to be corrected on that, but that's kind of because the feathers are in the same arrangement. Then Logray sort of shakes them down a bit when they get to the village.
Chief Chirpy.
Yeah, and then the next three, anybody's guess.
Where are we putting Lumat, Romba, and Warwick?
I've just guessed. I've put them pretty much in that order, Lee, because it becomes a very dark, mushy mess of sort of grey and brown Ewoks looking angry.
You do realise that people are going to be messaging in to this, and they're going to be actually telling you the exact order.
I really hope so.
The exact order.
So then the last one out of that lot, if we're going to move the scout trooper back to the parade scene, should be easy.
Anakin.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the original 96 vintage figures in order of appearance.
How does it look? Because the sculpts, obviously, from 1978 to 1985 changed. And the level of sculpting changed and the technology changed. How does it look with them all mixed and matched, where you've got like a small head Han in the same vicinity as an Imperial gunner, which is, completely different technology. You can tell that the way they sculpted that was different than the way they sculpted, let's say, for instance, small head Han.
It's a really good question, Lee. So, I mean, you've got things like the cloth cape jar in there, mixed in with the vinyl capes, which doesn't jar. We're sort of used to seeing that. The Imperial Commander doesn't look out of place at all. you know, you look at little small head Han and little small head Luke Stormtrooper. I don't think they vastly apart in terms of style. A TIE pilot next to an X-wing pilot doesn't jar with me. I think it's a nice way of displaying them. I think mixing up the droids, particularly with the first 12, where you've got the Death Star droid and Power droid in there with the Jawas and Luke, I think that feels right. Having all the Hoth characters together looks right.
One of the most interesting ways I've heard that loose figures displayed, because I think a majority of people go just on first 12, then the 20, 21, you group them together as, you know, Hoth, Bespin, so on and so forth, and Imperials together and what have you. So what you've described, actually, it's the first time I've ever heard anybody display the figures like that, and I think it's fantastic.
I'll share some pictures on the enhanced version.
What I said about the sculpts, thinking about it, is maybe a bit of a moot point, because if you look at some of the sculpts that were done of the last 17 or last 15, as I prefer them, there were different sculptors for each of the for quite a few of the figures anyway. So if you were, I think, didn't Bill Lemon do ones like Yak Face out of acetate, and then you had other sculptors that would come in and do them in a completely different medium, which in itself is going to affect how the sculpt looks. So my question about, do the sculpts actually line up? You know, like for instance, you're putting an 85 figure with a 78 figure. Perhaps that doesn't really matter at all anyway on that basis.
I've got an interesting fact about sculpts on figures. A friend of mine, his brother used to work at Royal Dalton, as was in Burslem, Stoke-on-Trent. And one of the sculptors that came to work for Dalton's some years ago now was actually the sculptor of a Man-O-Man and a B-Wing pilot. If you look at the figures next to one another, you can actually totally see they were done by the same guy.
Amazing.
Small world.
It's strange that in Stoke-on-Trent, obviously because of the pottery industry, we do get freelance sculptors. There's a good chance that you are going to pull people like that to the area because of it.
Another interesting fact is an advertising agency that I used to work for once commissioned an artist by the name of Frank Langford, who is responsible for the Emperor's, you know, the adverts for Palatoy, for the Mail Away Emperor.
Oh yeah,
Chewbacca and a couple of others. He did a load of work for Palatoy. He did work for the advertising agency that I used to work for, and I uncovered this file with his artwork in. At the time, I didn't realise who it was. Well, I wish I'd bloody kept it now.
Yeah, cool.
I do think that's a really fascinating way of lining them up. It'd be great to hear other ways of how people have got their loose run. If there's any other ingenious suggestions out there.
Colours would be cool, wouldn't it?
Colours.
People do the bookcases.
We could have this every month, Craig. You could change your run.
Yeah, because I've got nothing better to do.
You do them tall to short next month. Okay.
Well, it would be interesting to pass this on to the listeners and see if we can get some examples of different ways that people have arranged their loose runs.
Definitely.
This is madness.